The Culbertson Guidon, Custer's last flag, transcends the concept of Americana. It is really a national treasure. It is a sacred relic of our culture. One of the greatest privileges at Sotheby's is selling objects, and selling really almost isn't the right word, it's presenting objects of extraordinary significance, really, whether culturally, spiritually, and we've had that privilege many times. When I think of the meaning of a great object, like a Declaration of Independence, or an Emancipation Proclamation, or the battle flags from the Revolution, these are the context in which the Custer flag is being presented. And we understand the feelings that they draw from people because, quite frankly, we feel them ourselves very strongly. The flag itself is remarkable in the story that you can tell simply by looking at it. You can see the battle that's taken place around it. You can feel it in the stains and in the way in which it has been wounded, so to speak. You can also see in its characteristics, in its look, you actually can understand a good deal of the story of this extraordinary object. Oh, the Battle of Little Bighorn was one of the great climactic moments of the Indian Wars in the Great Plains between sort of 1860 and 1880. A great struggle, the clash of two civilizations meeting in circumstances that really forced them to go to war against each other. It was a battle in which the U.S. cavalry was annihilated. That was unthinkable. It was also astonishing to actually lose an entire battalion, completely wiped out, and led by one of the most famous officers in the U.S. Army, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, one of the most flamboyant officers. You know, long hair, fringe coats, a legend from the Civil War onwards, well known to newspaper reporters, a real national celebrity, and suddenly completely annihilated. His regiment would have gone to fight with a whole series of cavalry flags called Guidons. Each company had its own Guidon, and they're important because they mark the position of the company. They're also important in other ways too, because they were symbolically what the troops are fighting for. They represented the country. The story we have is that the Guidon bearer of Company C, Corporal John Foley, tried to save the flag from the last stand. He ripped it from the staff, put it under his shirt, and tried to flee the last stand with the flag, and was killed by the Indians some distance away. Because it was some distance away, and he fell in tall grass, his body was not found by the Indian women who came up after the battle was over. So when the U.S. Army burial party came 3 days later, discovered this extraordinary catastrophe, the unbelievable fact that all of Custer's men had died, they also discovered Corporal Foley and turned him over, and under his body they found his Guidon, his regimental, his company flag. The head of that burial party that found Foley was a man named Sergeant Culbertson, and he saved the flag. The flag not only represents symbolically what these men were fighting for, it represents in retrospect the 216 men who were killed in the last stand, entirely gone, and the other men who died elsewhere in that battle. And it's clearly been through a terrible ordeal. The flag is severely battle-worn, severely frayed, and yet still in remarkably fresh condition. It's made out of silk, it's fairly fragile, it's designed to flutter and fly easily in the breeze. It has a wonderful design, it's called a swallowtail design, it's the design of a Guidon. I don't think anybody else has had as much experience selling these kinds of extraordinarily significant emotive objects as Sotheby's. What is directly comparable to this are the remarkable Revolutionary War flags we sold 4 years ago, We sold those for well over $18 million. We sold one flag alone for well over $12 million, and quite justifiably, because they were astonishingly significant objects. But in the same way, this extraordinary flag from Little Bighorn fits into that context completely, a sort of sacred relic from an awful but terribly important conflict.